I had supposed in my innocence that silver mining was nice, easy business, and that, of course, silver lay around loose on the hillsides, and that all you had to do was to pick it up, and that you could tell it from any other substance on account of its brightness and its white metallic look. Then came my disappointment, for I found that silver was merely scattered through quartz rock. Gold is found in cement veins and quartz veins loosely mingled with the earth, in the sand and beds of rivers, but I never heard of any other house or home for silver to live in than quartz rock. This rock is of a dull, whitish color, faintly marked with blue veins. A fine powder of silver ore makes these blue veins, and this yields $30 in bullion. A little dab of silver that I could crowd in my mouth came out of this 2,000 pounds of solid rock. I found out afterward that $30 rock was mighty profitable. Then they showed me some more rock, which was a little more clouded, that was worth $50 a ton. The bluer and darker the rock, the richer it was. Sometimes you could find it worth $400, $500, and $600 a ton. At rare intervals, rock can be found that is worth $1,500 and $2,000 per ton, and at rare intervals you would see a piece of quartz that had a mass of pure silver in its grip, large as a child's head. More than pure, because it always has a good deal of gold mixed up in its composition. The wire silver is nature's aristocratic jewelry. The quartz crystallizes and becomes perfectly clear, just as clear and faultless as the diamond, and almost as radiant in beauty. Nature down there in the depths of the earth takes one of these quartz rocks, shapes a cavity, and right in its heart imprisons a delicate little coil of serpentine, pure white aristocratic silver. It was uphill work, this silver mining. There were plenty of mines, but it required a fortune to work one, for tons of worthless rock must be ground to powder to get at the silver. I was the owner of 100 silver mines, yet I realized that I was the poorest man on earth. Couldn't sell to anybody, couldn't pay my board. So I had to go to work in a quartz mill at $10 a week. A nice place, truly, for the proprietor of 100 silver mines. I was glad to get that berth, but I couldn't keep it. I don't know why. I was the most careful workman they ever had. They said so. I took more pains with my work than anybody else. I was shoveling sand, tailings as they call it. It is silver-bearing rock that has been ground up and worked over once. It is then saved and worked over again. I was so particular about it that I have sat still for 1 hour and a half and studied about the best way to shovel that sand. And if I couldn't cipher it out in my mind just so, I wouldn't go shoveling around recklessly. I would leave it alone until the next day. Many a time when I have been carrying sand from one pile to another, 30 or 40 feet apart, I would get started with a pailful when a splendid idea would strike me, and I would carry that sand right back and sit down and think about it. Like as not, I would get so absorbed in it as to go to sleep. I almost always go to sleep when I am excited. Well, I always knew there must be some tip-top, first-rate way to move that sand. At last I discovered it. I went to the boss and told him that I had got just the thing, the very best and quickest way to get that sand from one pile to the other. And he says, "I'm awful glad to hear it." You never saw a man so uplifted as he was. It appeared to take a load off his breast, a load of sand, I suppose. And I said, "What you want now is a cast iron pipe about 13 or 14 feet in diameter and say 40 feet long. And you want to prop one end of that pipe up about 35 or 40 feet off the ground, and then you want a revolving belt. Just work it with the waste steam from the engine. A revolving belt with a revolving chair in it. I am to sit in that chair and have a Chinaman down there to fill up the bucket with sand and pass it up as I come around, and I am just to soar up there and tilt it into that pipe, and there you are. It is as easy as rolling off a log. You never saw a man so overcome with admiration, so overwhelmed. Before he knew what he was about, he discharged me. He said I had too much talent to be fooling away my time in a quartz mill. If you will permit me, I would like to illustrate the ups and downs of fortune in the mining country with just a little personal experience of my own. I had a cabin mate by the name of Higby, a splendid good fellow. One morning the camp was thrown into a fearful state of excitement, for the Wide West had struck a lead black with native silver and yellow with gold. The butcher had been dunning us a week or two. Higby went up and brought a handful away, and he sat studying and examining it now and then, soliloquizing in this manner. That stuff never came out of the Wide West in the world. I told him it did, because I saw them hoist it out of the shaft. Higby went away by himself and came back in a couple of hours perfectly overcome with excitement. He came in, closed the door, went and looked out of the window to make sure there was nobody in the neighborhood, and said to me, "We are worth $1 million. The Wide West be hanged. That's a blind lead." Said I, "Higby, are you really in earnest? Say it again. Say it strong, Higby." He replied, "Just as sure as I am standing here, it's a blind lead. We're rich." Poverty had vanished, and we could buy that town and pay for it, and 6 more just like it. A blind lead is one that doesn't crop out above the ground like an ordinary quartz lead. The Wide West had simply tapped it in their shaft, and we had discovered it. It belonged to us. It was our property, and there wouldn't anybody in the camp dispute that fact. We took into partnership the foreman of the Wide West, and the Wide West had to stop digging. We were the Lions of Esmeralda. People wanted to lend us money. Other people wanted to sell us village lots on time, and the butcher brought us meat enough for a barbecue and went away without his pay. Now, there is a rule that a certain amount of work must be done on a new claim within the first 10 days, or the claim is forfeited to anyone who may first take it up. Now, I was called away to nurse an old friend who was dangerously ill at the 9 Mile Ranch, and I just wrote a note and threw it into the window telling Higby where I was gone. The fellow I went to nurse was an irascible sort of fellow, and while carrying him from the vapor bath, I let my end of him fall. We had a quarrel, and I started for home. When I reached there, I saw a vast concourse of people over at the claim, and the thought struck me that we were richer than ever, probably worth $2 million certain. Presently, I met Higby, looking like a ghost, and says I, "What on earth is the matter?" "Well," he says, "you didn't do the work on the mine. I depended on you. The foreman's mother dying in California, he didn't do the work. Our claim is forfeited and we are ruined. We haven't a cent." We went home to the cabin. I looked down at the floor. There was my note, and beside it was a note from Higby telling me that he was going away to look for another mine, which wouldn't have amounted to anything even if he had found it in comparison with our claim. It don't seem possible that there could be 3 as big fools in one small town, but we were there, and I was one of them. For once in my life, I was absolutely a millionaire for just 10 days by the watch. I was just ready to go into all kinds of dissipation, and I am really thankful that this was a chapter in the history of my life, although at the time, of course, I did a great deal of weeping and gnashing my teeth. When I lost that $1,000,000, my heart was broken, and I wanted to pine away and die. But I couldn't borrow money to live on while I did so, and I had to give that up. Everything appeared to go against me. Of course, I might have suicided, but that was kind of disagreeable. I had written a few letters for the press, and just in the nick of time, I received a letter from the Virginia City Daily Enterprise offering me $25 a week to go and be a reporter on that paper. I could hardly believe it. But this was no time for foolishness, and I was in for anything. I never had edited anything, but if I had been offered the job of translating Josephus from the original Hebrew, I should have taken it. If I had translated Josephus, I would have thrown in as many jokes as I could for the money and made him readable. I would have had a variety if I had to write him all up new. Well, I walked that 130 miles in pretty quick time and took the berth. Have you ever considered what straits reporters are sometimes pushed to in furnishing the public with news? Why, the first day items were so scarce, I couldn't find an item anywhere, and just as I was on the verge of despair, as luck would have it, there came in a lot of emigrants with their wagon trains. They had been fighting with the Indians and got the worst of it. I got the names of their killed and wounded, and then by and by there was another train came in. They hadn't had any trouble, and of course I was disappointed, but I did the best I could under the circumstances. I cross-questioned the boss emigrant and found that they were going right on through and wouldn't come back to make trouble. So I got his list of names and added to my killed and wounded, and I got ahead of all the other papers. I put that wagon train through the bloodiest Indian fight ever seen on the plains. They came out of that conflict covered with glory. The chief editor said he didn't want any better reporter than I was. I said, you just bring on your Indians and fetch out your immigrants. Leave me alone, and I will make the fur fly. I will hang a scalp on every sagebrush between here and the Missouri border. That was all first rate, but by and by items got low again, and I was downhearted. I was miserable because I couldn't strike an item. At last, fortune favored me again. A couple of dear, delightful desperadoes got into a row right before me, and one of them shot the other. I stepped right up there and got the victim to give me his last words exclusively for the Enterprise, and I added some more to them so as to be sure to get ahead of the other papers, and then I turned to the desperado. Said I, you are a stranger to me, sir, but you have done me a favor which I can never sufficiently thank you for. I shall ever regard you as a benefactor. And I asked him if he could lend me $50. We always borrowed a piece whenever we could. It was a public custom. The thought then struck me that I could raise a mob and hang on to the other desperado, but the officers got ahead of me and took him into custody. They were down on us and would always do any little mean thing like that to spite us. And so I was fairly launched in literature and the business of doing good. I love to do good. It is our duty. I think when a man does good all the time, his conscience is so clear. I like to do right and be good, though there is a deal more fun in the other thing.